Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi, my name is Tom. I was a friend of Cubby's. Cubby gave his love and his compassion, gave me a design for a living in a world that we both experienced with horror and dismay. Before I met Cubby, I had no way of living in this world. But he taught me that it wasn't the events of my life that were my life. It was how I responded to them. Cubby never said to me, "Have a good day." He used to tell me, "Give a good day." And with that, let us have a moment of silence and just think about what a beautiful, beautiful gift he was to all of us. And maybe we can just hear him laughing. Thank you, Tom. And Cubby used to tell me too, my name is Mark Schiff, and I'm sort of your host, for lack of a better word, this evening, but he used to tell me also, and he got his wish there, we pray before everything. And it was funny, every time let me just preface this for a second. I was asked to announce that there are people here who are going to say things that are sort of, they're in AA basically, and they were drunk for a long time and they're here today. So, but they may say things and we don't want it to sort of get out of here because they might start drinking again. So, but hopefully not. So if what you hear here, please let it stay here if you're not part of that group. But anyway, Cubby used to tell me to also pray before everything, and I've had many phone calls over 18 years that he was my AA sponsor, and I've been married 14, and I would get off the phone, my wife said, "Who were you talking to?" And I'd say, "Cubby," and she would always say, "Did he ask you to pray?" Always aware of what was going on. But let me tell you, I miss Cubby dearly too. He was a person I spoke to a lot, and I wish he was here today so I could tell him that a friend of mine died and I was hurt. But Cubby would say to me, "There is no death." So after years of him telling me this, I would say it a different way. I'd say, "Hey Cubby, you know my friend Jim? He left. He's gone. My parents aren't here anymore, Cubby. You remember, there is no death." So a few weeks back, somebody told me they had seen Cubby when he'd just come out of the hospital, and I asked him how he looked, and they said he looked kind of thin and pale, and it didn't seem to bother me. He always looked like that. In fact, I was thrilled that he looked like that, actually, and Cubby always looked a little older than he was. That's a picture of him at 5, by the way, over there on the right. I would actually be worried if they said Cubby put on 50 pounds and was buffed. That would have bothered the hell out of me. I knew something would be wrong then. But I first met Cubby through his books. I was 14 years old. Jewish kid from Forest Hills, from the Bronx in New York, and I picked up a copy of Last Exit to Brooklyn. I cut out of school one May day, smoked a couple of joints, drank some beer, and sat up on my roof and read the book. And just as soon as I finished the book, I said, "I've got to meet this guy. I've got to meet this man." And 22 years later, I drank enough beer to get to AA, and I saw this guy speak, and his name was Cubby. That's all I knew. And after this guy was done, I said, "I've got to meet this guy." And I was with a friend, and I said, I'm going to go talk to him. And the guy said, you know who this guy is? He's Hubert Selby Jr., the writer. And I said, my dream came true. 22 years later, I had a chance, and I went over and I introduced myself, and I was a friend of his for 18 years. We spoke a lot, and I moved to Texas about 2.5 years ago, and Cubby and I were always joking about being Jewish and him being a goy. And I called him, I told him I was moving to Texas. He said, you can't go there, it's all goyim. So we decided to go, and I told Cubby I was going to sell my house in Los Angeles, and he told me not to sell it, to rent it. And I said, what's this guy telling a Jewish guy about real estate? So I sold my house, and it went up $200,000. Then I told Cubby I was going to buy a house in Texas, and he told me not to buy one, to rent one. So I said, what's this guy telling this Jewish kid about real estate? I bought a house, I lost $30,000. So guys from Brooklyn knew what they were talking about. Anyway, we have a lot of people that want to speak tonight, and I'm going to bring them up, and some friends of Cubby and family members. And if you didn't know Cubby, I mean, you know, I know a lot of people here, but if you've never read his work, that's another way, because I know there are some people who may have just met him recently. It's another way to really get to know him on a whole different level. So he has to advise that. So first I would like to bring up one of Cubby's children, Dr. William Selby, please.
Thank you. I didn't actually prepare any written words or speech on it, so I'm just going to kind of say some words off the cuff. It was interesting to me on many levels, thinking about having come up here over the last week. I kind of always knew at some point in my life I'd be standing up here talking to a group of people about my father. And, you know, with a father who has been sick as many years as my father was, I always kind of expected it would happen sometime. But at the same time, I thought it would never happen, so it was still a little bit of a surprise. And like other people said, when he got out of the hospital, as a doctor, I thought he actually looked a lot better. I didn't expect him to die anytime soon. So. Oops. It's also interesting to see the group of people that are here today, because there are people who knew him from different facets of his life. So he had his life as a kid growing up in Brooklyn. He had his life as a writer, and his life as people with his friends that he helped out on their journey through life, and he had his life as a father. And each of us know him as a different person, and that's kind of why we're here today, is to help kind of put those pieces together. I was talking to someone earlier in the week and talking about how this was kind of like the AIDS quilt, where if you look at one little piece of the quilt, you really understand that person's life, and you understand the quilt from that perspective. But if you back up far enough to see the whole quilt, you don't understand any of it anymore. It just becomes a pretty quilt. And so what you need to do is talk to the people who have seen the other parts, and by having a discussion of all the different parts, you can kind of understand the whole quilt. And that's what I hope to do today. I hope to tell you about the part of Cubby, Hubert Selby, that I knew him as Dad, that I knew, and then we'll hear the other parts and see if we can't understand him as the man. I was listening to some interviews on NPR, I guess as anybody does when they lose someone they love. You kind of reach out and try to find remembrances of them. And it's a little bit easier when your father was prominent and has things being placed on the internet so you can listen to his voice again. And one of the things he said, which I remember him saying quite frequently in his life, was the reason he began to write. And the reason he began to write is one day he almost died, and he didn't. And he realized that if he had died, he was going to have felt like he blew his life, that he didn't accomplish anything with his life, that he had blown it. And he didn't want that feeling, so he set about to do something with his life, and he started typing and writing, and was it took him 6 years or so, and he finally was able to write his book, and many subsequently. The other purpose of today is to help testify for him that he didn't blow it, that his life did have meaning. The people here helped give a meaning to his life. There were many people who maybe never met him, read his book, and were able to find some sort of solace that somebody else understood the emotions that they felt, and that they weren't alone in the world. Or maybe there's someone he just, gave a good day to. He used to tell me that all the time. I used to resent it. But I understand it a little bit more now. As you get older, all the things that you were mad at your parents for, you start to do yourself, and you start to understand some more of what he was trying to say. So really, for the remainder of my time here, I just was going to share a few of the things that I remember about him. The memories I have are much different because he was my dad. So when people called and asked me, questions last week, they want to know what did he mean by the title of this book, or what did he, what's the meaning of life, and all these kinds of things. And they were never questions I thought to ask him. The questions I asked him were like, which baseball team did you like when you were a kid? And the Yankees, by the way. He wasn't a Dodger fan. And so, I knew him differently. And the things I remember are that just down the street, I was showing my wife, there's a movie theater. I don't know if it's actually a theater anymore. For a while it was a porno theater. But back when we used to go there, it was, you could see 4 movies that had come out, like 2 months earlier for $1 on Saturday. So every Saturday, he loved movies. We would pack up our sandwiches, sneak them in our pockets so we wouldn't have to buy any food at the popcorn counter. And we would go off and see the movies and spend the entire Saturday at the movies. And those are the memories I'm kind of cherishing right now. I remember afterwards we would often stop at 7-Eleven, and years later he wrote a little story about it, and I'd pick up a Big Gulp. And I remember the joy of just drinking that Big Gulp, walking with my dad. In California it's always a sunny day, so I suppose it was sunny. And it was just a really nice experience to be with him. And it's nice for me today to kind of look back at those things, because like many other people, sometimes my memory serves only to remember the torment in my life and only the things that pain me, and I don't take the time to look back at all the times I was happy and remember that I will have those times again. And it's really been a pleasure as I've been thinking about this last week or so to think about those different times, and even some of the times that were a struggle still have kind of a pleasant memory because of the journey. So I remember when we moved back to California in January of '82, and the airplane ticket cost $99, which it still does one way. He was carrying his typewriter in one hand, and we carried our suitcases in the other, and it was everything we owned in the world was what we could carry with us. And yet, slowly over time, we bought a toaster oven and some other things, but it was just kind of nice. We were together, we were setting out on this little adventure of how we were going to find a place to live and all those things, and that typewriter was with us. And that typewriter always kind of made the background music to my life. I just remember I always could hear him upstairs typing away, and he typed very fast on an IBM Selectric 3. And he often typed faster than it could, so the IBM repairman was the other fixture in our life. And it's also allowed me to think of the value of the other parts. I remember one time my sister was babysitting me, and I played on the typewriter, and I broke it. And I was very afraid at the time, and my sister, of course, took the blame for me, which older sisters do. And I think she probably got punished or something, and the repairman showed up. But it turned out it was some problem. I didn't really break it. I just turned the thing on. It was some other problem with the typewriter. So it's kind of silly to think about that, but a little part of me was disappointed when he started typing on a computer, because it didn't have the same sound, and that was the sound of my childhood, was that typewriter clicking away upstairs. It just gave some sort of continuity as we moved around. My dad gave me a lot of advice as I was growing up, and not much of it was spoken. But through that typewriter, he taught me how to just show up. I'm a high school dropout, and now I'm a doctor, so somewhere in between something happened to change that, as you can guess. And it was somehow, by watching what my dad did, I learned how you just show up. If you go to class and you don't like the class, it doesn't matter, you just show up. He would not be able to think of anything to write, so he would just sit down with a typewriter and just type. And it seems like such a simple thing to say out loud, and when you say it to somebody, they don't really hear it. But somehow, by watching him over the years, no matter how much pain he was in, he still showed up, and he still did what he had to do to keep on getting the things done and taking care of his responsibilities. And the other big lesson he taught me about life was to be honest, not just with everyone else, but with yourself. So, it's one thing to go rob a bank, and to him that wasn't such a bad thing, as long as you're honest with yourself that you were robbing that bank, and you weren't trying to say the bank owes you one because they rip you off with the ATM fees anyway. And it's really been an important lesson for me in life, to understand my motivation for things and why I'm doing them, to at least tell myself the truth. So my dad had a litany of things that he did wrong in his life, and I won't, list them out for you. I'm sure he wouldn't want me to. But he would have listened about himself because he was honest about that. And the thing that was truly remarkable was that until the last few days of his life, he was still struggling to try to correct those things himself. So where some people might have things about them that they're embarrassed about, they wouldn't be honest with themselves about it. He always was. So he always was trying to become a better person than he was the day before. And I only hope that I can get a piece of that for myself. So I thank everyone for coming.
Thank you, Billy. And now I'd like to bring up Claudia Selby.
Hello. I'm here today to honor my father. He touched so many lives. It makes me proud to be his daughter. When I was a child, my father was a paradox to me. Even then, I knew there was something very wrong with him, and at the same time, there was something very right with him. He had a depth of wisdom and understanding, but his gifted mind was impaled by addiction. Dad was always battling for life, for its meaning, and compelled to express it. He battled with a physical body that was always threatening to die. He battled with a mind so unique it threatened his very sanity. It was his great love of God that enabled him to overcome his demons. He not only conquered addiction, he poured himself out to help others, including me. Cubby and Suzanne welcomed me into their home and set me on the path to my own recovery. That was a precious time in my life for which I'm very grateful. I believe his willingness to be used by God was why God gave him a long life, despite the doctor's bad reports. Though I wasn't actually raised by my father, my parents divorced when I was 5, I have good memories of him. Baseball games in the park in Brooklyn, hot dogs with mustard and sauerkraut from the street vendor, and real Italian ice. Books, record albums, and white china horses. Disney World and Universal Studios. Letters and phone calls he never failed to answer. His generosity when I needed help. But I have no memory of him ever saying a cutting or unkind word to me. How it touched me every time he called me sweetheart. How modest he was about his fame. With so much he could have bragged about, instead, he saw himself with humility and accuracy. The most fun thing about him was his sense of humor. He had the greatest laugh in the world. Even though he spent much of his life a tortured and tormented soul, his ability to find the humor in it all was perhaps his greatest gift. There's someone else I would like to honor today. Dad had many admirers, but he had one best friend. Suzanne, thank you for loving my father. I'm so grateful he was home with you for his last days. Every day at my job, I care for people who are left to die alone. I know what you did wasn't easy. It took great courage, and I am so grateful. Thank you. Dad, it hurts that you're gone, but I know where you are. I can see you walking with the Lord in your glorified body. No more struggling, no more pain. Getting all the answers to all the mysteries of life and of the Spirit you pondered. I can see your joy and I can hear your laughter. What a gas. So, Dad, just as you always ended your letters to me, I'm going to hang my clothes on this line. I love you, and I'll see you again one day. And to all those who loved Cubby, God bless you, and give a good day.
Thank you, Claudia. Now Rachel Keene, also Cubby's daughter.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I never have liked these things. I have to agree with what my brother and my sister said and say that the biggest thing for me is that my dad came back and he did do something that mattered. And what mattered to everyone is different. For me, what matters is he raised me, and he was there for me, and he put Band-Aids on my knees, and my daughter's laughing. And he loved my children, and he loved me. And all of the people that knew him and all of the people that were around him made that possible. You know, if he hadn't been involved with the things he was involved in, he wouldn't have been able to be there for me or for any of his other children. And that's a thank you to those people. And I wanted to say thank you to him for being there for me and tell him that I love him. And I will never forget him. He won't be forgotten.
Also, one of Cubby's, his son is here, but he's not going to be speaking. Kyle, would you just show the people? Kyle Mack, ladies and gentlemen, Cubby's son. Rachel and Billy I haven't seen in like 14 years. I saw them when they were real little, and every time I would talk to Cubby, I would ask him how you were, and he was, but you know, he was so proud of you. I mean, he'd talk to you, oh, hey, my son, the doctor, you know. Can't believe it, right? The doctor. And Rachel, your family was so proud of you and your family, and of course Suzanne, the love of his life there, always just said the most incredible things about her. Listening to him talk about Suzanne taught me how to talk about my wife in a great way. I'd like to bring up now Joe Carafello, who's Cubby's neighbor, lived upstairs from him.
Good afternoon. How I met Cubby, I was thrusted into his building, and like he was the krypton for my life. I was in a little basket at his doorstep, in a sense, 13 years ago. Oh God, that's my laundry list. Oh, okay. You know, it's amazing, you know, that I'm even standing here today because I met Cubby, like I said, 13 years ago, and about 3 years after I met him, we started a journey of a friendship that's kept me alive. You know, nothing, I can't add anything that's been said or has been written about Cubby as far as him being so fabulous as a human being. One thing he did tell me, he was going to get a personal trainer after this was all over so he can carry water to the podium. You know, so there's two bottles here. I don't want to take a lot of time. I mean, this, you know, I know they have this event planned so wonderfully, thanks to Kenny. When we were in the hospital, I was with him March 11th in the emergency room, and the amazing thing about Cubby is everything he talked about, he did. Number one, I never heard him speak ill of any other person. Never gossiped, wouldn't tolerate it. We were at the hospital and the doctor was trying to do a particular procedure and he had rubber gloves on, and Cubby, in his inimitable style, said, let me hold something. There was something he had in his hand for you. I know how difficult it must be to work with those gloves on. And he was helping the doctor help him. I mean, that's just the man he was, or is in my heart. And when we got there, it was kind of crowded, and there were a lot of noises, as emergency rooms can have. And he said, we should write an opera and use the sounds in this room. Then he turned to me and he said, is the world going to be okay without me? And that's really a rhetorical question, because I know that my world wouldn't have been okay without him. Thank you for letting me participate.
Thank you, Joe. And now Merle Edelman, his old friend of his. That's right.
Hi, my name is Merle. I met Cubby when he first got to L.A. about 40 years ago. We met at Barney's Beanery. I think Vinnie Cirillo introduced us. Vinnie knew Cubby from Brooklyn. I was a filmmaker, and Cubby came out here to try to get a film made of Strike, one of the stories in Last Exit to Brooklyn, and Vinnie wanted to put us together, thought we could help each other. We became good friends. I loved his book. I loved him. I loved to drink with him. I got a call from Austin, Texas yesterday from a mutual friend who's 90 years old and still going strong. Dear Cubby, may your name be inscribed in the book of life. Love, Charlie Polachek. I promise to deliver that. I already knew Suzanne when I met Cubby. I had met her a couple years before when she was 17, I think. Cubby didn't believe in shame. I was just rereading last night a whole file full of letters I got from Cubby when he was back east for those 4 or 5 years, however long it was, in the late 70s, early 80s. And the most passionate of the letters was about how important it was for a person to tell their story honestly. And that's true, because Cubby was saving my life from the minute I met him, although neither one of us knew it. Cubby was saving my life a couple of years after I met him, when he came out of the sheriff's drunk tank and told me, and my new wife at that time, my second wife, Joanne, told us that he had kicked heroin cold turkey, and he was afraid that he was going to try and score some more, and would we take him home and sit on him and do whatever it took not to let him do that. And with true alcoholic arrogance, I said, are you sure you mean it? Because if we take that step, that's exactly what we're going to do. And he said, yeah. And then, feeling like a hero out of James Joyce's Ulysses, I proceeded to stay with him night and day for a few days and keep him drunk. We went from bar to bar. All those boulevard bars started with B in those days. Most of them were straight, not all of them. It didn't matter. They had a drink, we went in. Barney's and Bailey's and the Beaujolais V, and then there was Duke's and the Palm, and we went from one to the other. I introduced him to Suzanne because I was trying to impress her. And he was a literary celebrity, and she was into literature, and I was kind of obsessed with her. So I introduced her to him to show off, and he misunderstood, and so did she. He accepted her as a gift. And I never resented him for it. I understood. I fully understood, and how could I get mad at that? And so we didn't have any trouble staying friends. It wasn't easy for him, or for anybody in those days, to get 86 from Barney's, but Cubby managed it. He had a temper. He got hard to handle sometimes. And I had to go to Barney and plead his case. I pleaded family values. I told Barney he's breaking up a family. They need to be together for the sake of the kids. And he didn't 86 Suzanne, and now he's separating husband from wife, and it wasn't right. Barney went for that and let Cubby back in. But he made me responsible for being sure that he behaved. 1969, Cubby and Suzanne disappeared from the boulevard. I heard they got sober. And I didn't know what that meant. It was very abstract to me. The next 7 years I saw them about twice, even though they lived across the street part of that time. And I happened to see one of them outside, and I'd wave, and I had a sense that it was what they needed, and I felt like a guy with muddy shoes who didn't want to step on your white rug. So I didn't try to invade there. I respected what they were doing, even though I didn't understand it. And my own life started going down the sewer. And a judge decided I needed to get sober. And the very first place he sent me to, I ran into Suzanne, and she said, "We've been saving a seat for you." And she said, "I got to take you home to Cubby because he won't believe it unless he sees it." And she took me home, and they sat in the kitchen and talked to me till midnight and got me to promise to go to bed without a drink, got me to promise to call them in the morning before I took the first drink. And they took turns staying with me, alternate days, while the other one stayed home with the kids. And they kept me sober till I wanted to be sober. And if I hadn't seen what a bad drunk Cubby was, if I hadn't seen the degradation that he had entertained in his life, if I didn't know his story, I couldn't have heard him. I wouldn't have lived these last 28 years. I'd have been dead. I'm only here because of Cubby and Suzanne. I only have a wonderful life today because of them. I only have a beautiful wife today because of them. My entire existence wouldn't have happened because of them. When I first got sober, Cubby told me two things. Because I couldn't imagine ever being happy again. I was so completely burned out and everything was gone. And I said, "You think it's possible to ever be happy again?" And he laughed and he said, "Don't worry about happiness. But happiness is what happens automatically when we stop doing the things that make us unhappy." It took me a couple of years to get honest enough with myself to begin to see what I did to make me unhappy, so I could start to let go of it a little at a time. He said another thing to me early in my sobriety, and I didn't know if he had coined the phrases or if he was quoting somebody. And I asked him about it maybe 20 or 25 years later, and he couldn't remember ever saying that, and he couldn't remember ever hearing it. But I remember. And what he said is what he actually did, and why his life is going to be so valuable, like a beneficent chain letter going out around the world that may never stop, hopefully. He said, the only way to transform a society is to people it with transformed individuals. And the only individual I can transform is me. And I can do no more. But I ought to do no less. You didn't do any less, Cubby.
Thank you, Merle. And I'd like to bring up Jim Miller.
Wow, a lot of us here. I'm Jim Miller, and I knew Cubby when we both had hair. We go back, and we spent a lot of time lately together. And Cubby was my friend, and I was Cubby's friend. God, he loved his family. He loved you. We talked a lot about loving, and it was so much a part of who he was. He said he thought it may be the only reality. You know, the rest of it is perhaps an illusion. We talked in those terms. We talked a lot about writing. And even that, it's interesting, Mike Graham, I don't know if Mike's here, but Mike sent an email that something he picked up on the net that I brought along, that Cubby gave an interview. I don't know where, some time ago. But I'll read a paragraph. Cubby said, one of the things I've become aware of through the years is how much I love the people I write about. I would not have believed it, as I am filled with judgments, so many based on appearances. Yet I realized before I started writing that I needed to put the reader through an emotional experience, and in order to do that, I had to share that experience. So I have a strong point of identification with my characters. I know how much they struggled, and the judgments started slowly to slip away. I could see the love buried under all this madness and behind the obsessions. And it's really evident in his work. It's evident in his life. He was a kind of a beacon, I guess, for the worst of us and the worst scumbags there are. Cubby would find that he would love them. He had a compassion for them based, I guess, on identification, like it is with most of us. He certainly knew in our society, you know, our little gang of maniacs, that one drunk talking to another was the secret. And I think in his work, and what I got so much from the very first thing I ever read of his, was the one human being talking to another, and talking straight from the heart made a difference, made something different. I'm a better man because of what he wrote and what he knew. He wasn't afraid of death. I know that. We sat and talked about it. He says, I'll get out of this rotten body. It'll be great. You know, he was pretty cool with that. And I didn't see fear in him. I mean, I watched it, you know, I mean, he had a kind of an eloquent rage, you know, that was something to behold, and yet it was filled with compassion, filled with understanding, a great tenderness, and I feel so privileged that I was among his friends, and that I'm among friends here. What a giant. What a gift. I really loved Cubby. I really loved being loved by him. You know? It makes my life sweet. I miss you, Cubby.
Thank you, Jim. Jim had brought up the subject of death. Cubby and I had talked about it a number of times, and he once said in Brooklyn, one of the differences between Brooklyn and the rest of the country is that the funeral homes there know who's coming in 2 weeks in advance. So, I'd like to bring up Judy Luby, please.
Hi, I'm Judy. I feel privileged also to have been Cubby's friend. When I thought about sharing here today, as I often do, I thought about what Cubby would have told me. I think he would have told me to say what was in my heart. And he would have said heart with that New York A that I cannot duplicate to save my life. Cubby was such an essential part of my life and being, it's hard to know where to start, but I'll try. I knew Cubby was going to die. I just knew it. He could hardly breathe. He walked with that swagger of his, but he always looked like he was about to fall down. Many times he told me everything he ate made him sick, and that his body was eating itself alive, whatever that meant. I knew he was going to die, and that was 22 years ago. I met Cubby in 1982, right around the time they were talking about, when Billy was talking about. Some people thought we should know each other because we were both single parents and our kids were roughly the same age. Cubby had just come back from the East with Billy. And he didn't have a car, so I provided rides, and we all went on picnics to Santa Monica Pier, stuff like that. I remember once at the Santa Monica Pier, we were walking around. I didn't know what to make of him sometimes because I didn't know him that well then. And we're walking around the pier trying to figure out what we were going to eat, and he kept pointing to this thing and saying it was bad for him. He kept pointing to that and saying it was like nothing there he could eat. So I got the kids settled with some food, and we sat down and started eating. I turned around, and Cubby's chowing down on a hamburger and French fries, and I'm going, wait a minute. So that's just how he was. Typical of Cubby, I was friends with him for quite a while before I had any idea he read books. I later wrote books. I know he read them too, but I later came to love everything. I personally had a catharsis out of reading every single thing he ever wrote. We got along. It got to where I called him regularly because he always seemed to be happy I called, and even though it was obvious he had many demons, he believed so strongly in a higher power. He really was able to set me on the right spiritual path over and over again. He got me writing letters for Amnesty International. When he joined up with Beyond War, I drove him to the meetings, and I joined up too. I don't think anybody, except maybe my own father, ever had such a significant impact or helped me as much as Cubby did. I remember being in so much pain over a breakup with somebody in 1984. Boy, did he understand pain. He calmed me and helped me through it day after horrible day. I was saying recently that to Kenny, actually, that the kind of pain I have now is the kind of pain I would have called Cubby about. But I'll tell you, I'm so blessed that he was in my life for so long. I talked to him so many times about so many different things that I almost think I'd know what he'd say about almost anything. He was always so, positive about everything. In 1985, Cubby went to work for my second husband. Not too long after that, he helped me weather my divorce from the same guy. And it was okay, you know. I never felt like he took sides or judged any of it. He was just there to remind me of what was important and what was real and help me through the pain. I have a pretty good relationship with my daughter today, who's here today. Never could have happened without Cubby. He told me that she was there to teach me. She wasn't there for me to like order around or whatever. He always loved Heather and always thought, as he would have said, that she was marvelous. He used to say she was marvelous. When Heather had a bat mitzvah, Cubby put on a prayer shawl, got up and said a special prayer. We all thought he looked really cute in his little skull cap. In 1995, when I decided to get married yet again, Cubby did the ceremony, but you didn't know he could marry people. I got him ordained through the Universal Life Church.
Lisa Cherry, who will read a note from Lou Reed. Lisa.
Hi. This is a note from Lou Reed. One of the highlights of my life was when I first met Cubby. I'd been a fan of his for many years, and Last Exit to Brooklyn affected my writing style immensely. Every time I saw him was a learning experience for me, and I was always in awe of him. He told me something once regarding his writing. He said, essentially, who am I to censor this, or to impede it, or to get in its way? That would be wrong. I've always kept that in mind, and I continue to, and forever will admire Cubby and the books he wrote, and the courage it took to write them. He is typically more admired in Europe than here. Perhaps with his passing, he'll get some of the honor he deserves. Lou Reed, New York City.
Thank you, Lisa. Now I'd like to bring up Ilva Edelstein reading a poem from James Remar to Cubby.
Fragile in appearance, never in fact. You are the Titan Prometheus to me, bringer of sacred fire, warmth, and light. Hercules' death has broken the chains that bound you to the rock that was your unhappy body. Now you can dance as lightly as ashes in the wind. Breathe deeply, my friend. Breathe deep.
Thank you, Ilva. Henry Rollins.
Hi, my name is Henry. It's nice to be in a room full of so many people who love Cubby. Many of you, probably after you met him, you would try and spread the gospel of Cubby. Someone would say, oh, I read his book, Last Exit to Brooklyn. And you'd say, no, but there's more books. And then you got to meet the guy, because the guy is huger than the books. The books were enough, but then you meet the man. And in the early 80s, I became aware of his writing. Someone handed a book of his to me. So I read the first 4 novels in the order they were released. And by the time I got to The Demon, at one point I was riding on an airplane reading about Harry, this utterly despicable, horrible human being. Just a more diabolical person could not be constructed. And I was reading about myself. And I was like, I can't read this anymore. I'm going to crash the plane. My thoughts are going to be so bad, I'm going to make the plane hit the pavement. So I had to stop reading the book. And by the time I had totally eviscerated my psyche by finishing Requiem for a Dream, I couldn't do anything. And I found out that he lived in Los Angeles, and he's in the phone book. That 653 number that he had till a few weeks ago. So I called it. I said, hello. Hello. I said, I'm not a maniac. I'm just this guy. I really need to meet you because I've been incapacitated by your books. And he goes, I know the feeling. And so I caught a ride out to Orlando Street, and I spent an afternoon with him, and we talked about Harry and his books, and we became friends immediately. You know how it is when you meet Selby. it's an immediate friendship that you're going to have for the rest of your life. And so we started hanging out and started having these amazing conversations, life-changing conversations, as you do when you hang out with this wonderful man. And in 1989, I called him. I said, let's go to Europe together and read things we wrote to a bunch of people. So we, between airplanes and Euro-Rail, we went across the European continent. And it was like hanging out with this great rock star, because every night we'd be somewhere, and out come these hardcover books of his in translation, and these people lining up with moist hands and trembling to meet the great Hubert Selby. And there he is, this rock star, just being very gracious, and everyone is all, Mr. Selby, and he's like just lining them up. And one night we find ourselves in a pension in Germany, and there's all these beautiful black and white photographs on the wall of all these great bebop jazz players. And the grande dame of the pension was trying to explain to us who this man, Charlie Parker, was. Like, we don't know. And he looks at this very old sepia-toned black and white photograph, and he goes, that was a blue suit. And that tie was always too small. Look at the tie. And you realized he was aware of Charlie Parker in a very immediate, close way. This woman was very impressed. And so, being quite the enthusiast of bebop jazz myself, I started asking him questions. So you saw Charlie Parker? He said, I watched Charlie Parker break in Miles Davis. I watched Miles Davis break in John Coltrane. And I said, what about Serge Chaloff? What about Billie Holiday? Billie Holiday, 50 times, 60 times. You saw her that many times? Yeah. Bud Powell. Was in the loony bin with Bud Powell. Been there, done that. And so we spent hours and hours, days, weeks together. And one time we found ourselves driving through the Swiss Alps, and we took a beauty break to get out of this little box van we were driving in to behold the Alps. I said, isn't it beautiful? He goes, it's a bunch of rocks. I want lunch. And so one day at breakfast in Switzerland, in 90 minutes, he outlined the willow tree from its beginning to its end. He told me the whole story. And he goes, I'm going to write that book if I can live long enough. And as you all know, death was always just hovering around Cubby, and he had no fear of it, ever. And so that was 1989. Our friendship keeps going on, and he would call me, come over, I want to read you something. I'd show up as quickly as I could. I've been talking to Sun Tzu. I go, Sun Tzu, the author who's been long dead many centuries ago, who wrote The Art of War? Yeah! I got steno pads full of these conversations, and I would sit at his feet at the little apartment on Orlando, and he would read me these long transcripts of these conversations, these amazing conversations, where he's just taking it all down, where he's the secretary to Sun Tzu. I hope those notebooks exist somewhere. It's really amazing stuff. In 1991, a good friend of mine was murdered about 3 or 4 feet away from me. The man was shot twice. I was shot at, but the bullet missed me, 2 missed me very closely. So I was very lucky. I didn't know what to do with all that pain and horror, and I was residing in my lawyer's office, sleeping on her floor for a few days. I had nowhere to live at the time. And one night, Cubby called me up. He said, get your skirt on. I'm coming to get you. I said, I can't go out. I can't do anything else. Shut up! I'm coming over. And so he picked me up at Hollywood and Sycamore, and he took me out to dinner, and he took me to a movie, and we worked through it. And he wrote a wonderful eulogy for my good friend Joe Cole, and one of the lines of that is on his headstone. And so in the most trying moments of your life, there's this guy with this undying love, this great light. And I travel a lot, so most of my correspondence in the last few years with Cubby has been by letter. And I'd always finish the letter with, I love you, my good friend. And to say that you love someone, for some of you people in here, you know how it is. It's very hard to let your guard down, to say that you love someone because you're afraid of not being loved back, or you're afraid of somehow being hurt or injured somehow for your vulnerability. And you knew you could always say that to Cubby because you knew you were greatly loved by him. And to know him was to love him, and also to be loved by him. And you could feel very safe by saying, I love you, Cubby, and he'd say, I love you too. And it's horrible that he's gone. But in my opinion, he'll never be gone. I continue my relationship with him in the present tense. There is a great sigh of relief across Southern California now that he's no longer driving. Perhaps some of you have seen that huge Volvo Saab tank machine he had hurtling down some street. You should be driving at half that mile per hour down with that skinny fist punching through the driver's side with this incredible vitriol coming out if anyone came close to that lane. And sometimes I would be his fake roadie and go with him to AA meetings just to watch the guy speak and light up a room. And we would be driving to San Diego or Santa Barbara, and I'd be fearing for my life. I would test his seatbelt, make sure I'm going to survive this. And he's driving, we're swerving like that, like that shit. And we used to get together and remark to each other, we're really angry people. I said, I'm mad. And he's like, me too. But as always, he found a way to work past it, and he would help us work past anything that was in our way, knowing that love was always the answer. He once told me that after his father had passed away, that the two of them were closer than ever, now that he was gone, and they spoke all the time. And he said, we're closer than ever now that we got the physical part of everything all the way out of the way. And now that the physical part of Cubby's life is out of the way, perhaps we will find ourselves drawn to him closer and closer every year as the pain in that body that he struggled so hard against, that was always plaguing him, that could have been the thing that challenged him and brought him to the ground, that would not stop him. I mean, to live as long as he did with what was done to his body, it's a miracle, and it shows you the strength of his spirit and the love he was able to get and give so freely. And so my relationship with the Cubby will always be in the present tense, because with Cubby it's never over. The conversation will always be happening. And if you consider the reason we're all here today, it might not be the best of circumstances, but if you consider the person who brings all of us to this room right now, then this is as good a day as it gets. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is an incredible event here. It's remarkable. I also had one of those rides with Cubby. He was speaking at an AA meeting about a 100-mile ride. If it wasn't a spiritual trip we were on, I never would have rode with him. It was. We got there, and he let me speak for 10 minutes before him, and then this guy came over and said, I'd like you to speak at my meeting. I said, where is he? He said, it's 50 miles past here. So I went over to Cubby. I said, 150 miles, Cubby. And he said, you go. That's it, you go. You do what, you show up. So I know what you're talking about. I'd like to bring up now James Reagan. Cubby taught writing at USC, which he was most proud of for 20 years. And James was the director of the professional writing program there. And James?
Thank you so much. Henry, thank you for all of those wonderful words, and I can only champion everything that you've said about Cubby. We're here to just give love to this beautiful man, because he gave so much love to us. And I knew him for that word, for the 20 years that I worked with him. He would always say he worked for me, or he taught for me. No, he taught me pretty much for 20 years. But we did readings together as well. And to show his wit, he was constantly on that edge. We did a reading, I think about 5 or 6, and he would read the fiction, I would begin with the poetry, and we were reading at the huge convention, the Associated Writing Programs Convention in Palm Springs. And he was on a cane at that time, that morning, and as he was walking up to go to the podium after I'd read, and I was assisting in the audience, truly giving him a great applause, but he kept saying, this is a pity applause, this is a pity applause. So he milked it all the way to the podium. And he said to me, he says, if they only knew this morning I dropped a bottle of Arrowhead water on my foot. When I first received the call from Cubby Selby, it came something like this. He says, this is Cubby Selby, and I'm calling to see if there was any way you could use me down at your writing program. And I said, well, usually what we do is if someone interested to send in a resume and any other information. And then I stopped dead and I went, I'm sorry, excuse me, is this Hubert Selby Jr.? He said, yes. I said, you're teaching in the spring. And I swear we had no budget for it. And the story is well known by him. I had no budget for it, so I dipped into my own salary to pay his spring salary, knowing I could be reimbursed the next semester, which I did. And we started him on this wonderful journey. And the students who are gathered here today, I mean, the love he had for them. He worked with them. He had this Zen approach to their writing. We did a tribute, thank God. Henry sent a beautiful note last year. We did a tribute to Cubby last year down at USC. And I remember writing the words on the plaque. And the words really were words he loved. He would repeat them to me. He would say, you really do mean this, nobility of conscience. He says, yes. He says, you really believe this, integrity? He says, yes. He says, compassion? He says, yes, these were your words. But the one he loved the most was artist. He loved the fact that he could be called that in his writing. And one thing he loved most about me, he would say, is that he knew that I did have a trial with the New York Yankees, and I did make the team. And he said, and they're losing, aren't they? And I said, yes. And he says, and you didn't play for them? He says, no. He says, well, there you go. I wrote 2 poems for him tonight. And one is, both of them are adaptations for him. It has to do with his always saying, give a good day. I want to give a good poem or two poems. This is a villanelle for Hubert Selby Jr. to Cubby. You have been in time too short a light. You fathered from the longest hour of day. And passionately your words tuneful turning we inherit. And where the Los Angeles fields of moons and marigolds allowed your crippled lungs to root and grow, you have been in time too short a light. To author all the world's impermanence we hold inviolate. And now your breath antiques the planet's motion the way your words do, passionately. Their joy's tuneful turning we inherit. Say to the bold Pacific, as it bends to find the prophet moon, breathe still, and be for the horizon the heartscape you have been, in time too short a light, to know on what page or dream your imagination held its last revision. Brooklyn's sun, we sing now your passion in every word whose tuneful turning we now inherit. What story, what fiction's grand dominion, one innocent light of refusal had you known the promised life to pay. You have been in time too short a light to know how passionately your memories tuneful turn we inherit. And this, for those of the students who loved him dearly and those of you who know, the courage he showed, even to the last day, 3 weeks before he died, coming to class with that oxygen pack and the heavy breathing up that elevator and with his cane, and he was there. If anyone taught us courage in a human being, this man did. He taught me the astonishment of living, and this poem is entitled that. He was clearly my brother, my older brother, in so many ways. The astonishment of living. I saw above the spreading page my brother Cubby, weaving stories in his eyes. I saw his life on the opposite shore of the river yield up his buckets to the falls. Every drop was bathed in the fragrant shawls of eglantine. Every leaf in wind rising up to comb each branch sent a whisper out along the slope. Let go. Let go the breath in rain and every strand of light in fog. Let go of the tongue's crow until it sings along with rocks and runnels as if it were divine. Let go of honored sky and earth. Let go the horizon in between. Lose all the sunlit undulations of the season's wheat and sing. Sing out to words, to truth, to all that breathes into the pores of minds. Let go the sovereign moons of space, the celestial laws of aureoles breathing out a planet, pulsing out its days. And where the stars ignite in showers, let them fall. Recite his poet's song that tomorrow wind will bring in squalls. Free his melody of words as you would a line or burden from a well. Allow the astonishment of living, one reed or willow, feeding swallows through a hungry night until they weary of elation. Let all buckets fill, all lost be light. I saw my brother, Cubby, weaving stories in his eyes, and fathering in us his dreams we grew, astonished by all creation, by his love and the grandeur of his life.
Thank you very much, James. I'd like to bring up Michael Lally, poet, and he will be reading an excerpt from The Willow Tree.
Like everybody else, he was my friend. When we got together, we'd talk about how much we missed New York, especially 1950s New York, how great Bud Powell and Lester Young are, and Jimmy Joyce, as he called him, and William Carlos Williams, and old radio shows like Johnny Dollar. What it was like to join the service in our teens, learn how to write on our own, raise sons alone, battle our demons. Being with him always felt like being home. And in the beginning, met in '82 when he came out here, back here, and I moved out here. In the beginning, I didn't understand some of the things he'd say to me, like once I told him I was caught up in a vicious circle, and he said, well, dig the circle. Another time I said I was complaining about how I couldn't get a handle on a situation. He said, Michael, there is no handle. And slowly I got it. He helped me understand that my arrogance was just fear and that the better choice was always love. Years ago I was whining about my financial problems, and he said, when you get a check in the mail, thank God for the blessing. And when you get a bill in the mail, thank God for the blessing. And I reminded him that a few weeks ago when I saw him, spent some time together talking about old movies and all that stuff. And he said, yeah, the only difference between the check and the bill is my judgment. He was beyond profound for me.
Thank you, Michael. And now, I'd like to bring up Darren Aronofsky, the director of Requiem for a Dream. Haven't seen it? See it, please. And he's going to read an excerpt from it.
When I was in film school, I made a short out of Fortune Cookie, which is from Songs of the Silent Snow, which you should also read. And it was a really bad adaptation. And I remember being a cocky student and calling up the Writers Guild of America and asking if I could get a phone number for Hubert Selby Jr.'s agent. And they gave me his home phone number. And that's how, easy he was to get to. And I called him up and got that message, and he picked up and invited me over. And I must say I was expecting, probably someone that looked more like Henry Rollins than Hubert Selby Jr. Scary looking guy. Not to say he's scary. And, I went to his house, and I found the one house that happens to look like it should be in Brooklyn, not in Los Angeles. that concrete bunker he lived in for many years. And he buzzed me in, and standing there in a pair of underwear, and that's it, was Hubert Selby Jr., my hero. And it was not what I expected, and we didn't become friends right away because I just was totally thrown, and I didn't know how to even begin to talk to him. And we sat there for like 5-10 minutes, and then finally I left. And I sent him fortune cookie. I never heard from him, which was probably a good thing because it was definitely not a good interpretation. And then years later, I got the idea to make Requiem for a Dream. And he once again sort of accepted me with open arms. And it was a very, very hard film to make. And something which I never shared with anyone really was, it's one of those things often you share a lot of memories, especially when you're doing press on a film. You talk about stuff over and over again. And what happens is those memories sort of, they don't become real. They sort of disappear, and they become some type of fiction that didn't really happen. It becomes the words and not the experience. And I had one experience on it that was one of the most meaningful things of my life. And what it was is at the premiere of Requiem at Cannes, we brought Selby over, and as Lou Reed said in his note, in Europe he's a rock star. And he got the respect and he got the photographs. And when we went to the red carpet, each step with his cane, all the cast and crew walked up really slowly with him, and we helped him up the steps. And the screen at Cannes is this huge, huge screen that I had no idea how to deal with it. And the last sort of 5-10 minutes of the film, I was just sort of sitting like this because I was so embarrassed, that anyone might be like looking at me or seeing what I was, what Selby had made me put these people through. And it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and when the film ended, the distributor was sitting behind me, and he's like, stand up, and the applause started. And before I knew it, there was, I just felt this thing in my arms, and it was tweed. And it was covered in a very, very thin layer of moisture, and it was vibrating. And I had no idea what it was, and I was just sort of overwhelmed, and I sort of pulled back, and I saw it was Cubby, and he was sobbing. And for me at that moment, it was like I didn't care what anyone had to say about the movie, because it was done for me. And till he left the room, just for anyone who didn't hear about it, they didn't stop the clapping for about 15 minutes till he left the room. And when he left the room, not when anyone else, Ellen Burstyn or anyone, when he left the room, they stopped clapping. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. I know on the DVD there's an interview with Cubby, isn't there, that runs like 20 minutes? With Ellen Burstyn. I saw it the other night, and it's fantastic. She's interviewing Cubby, and it's long, it's wonderful, and he's very much alive and saying what we know he was about. I'd also like to thank this evening Kenny Schifrin, who, a round of applause, he put this together. Where are you, Kenny? I know you're here. Thank you. Thank you for a great event. We saw, remarkable. And now, Cubby.
Hey, that's a little uplifting, loose rock and roll for me.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.